Hi, I'm Dave Levina. I'm an artist through Cork, living in Berlin for the last 6.5 years, 7 years. That's about around the time that's about as long as I've been using TouchDesigner as well. I kind of got into it when I moved to Berlin initially to make visuals, to then export and use in Resonum. I come from a VJ, come from a fine art background, painting, got into making videos, video installations, got into VJing for festivals here in Ireland, and then moved to Berlin, which then same kind of fake skills then are then applied to performing lights. That's kind of my main job there. I'll start.
Closer to you, yeah.
So I work as a lighting designer and lighting operator for clubs, festivals. Work primarily at RSO, which would have been the Grease Moda, if anyone's familiar with that as a nightclub in Berlin. I also work for White Void and Dark Matter, work as a technician for them, and also do installations for when they do larger shows. I travel as a technician for them, and I also teach kind of interaction design to musicians, primarily using TD Ableton through BIM University in Berlin, just general freelance audiovisual design, lighting design, and more so over the past 4 years, my kind of main, I guess, USP professionally is to do network design for theater shows or live shows to be able to kind of knit everything together. I'm just going to go through 3 shows today, 2 previous ones and 1 that's upcoming. And they're just going to go through different examples of implementing interactivity in, I guess, theatrical contexts or public work contexts or then installation work as well. I'll go into a brief kind of description of the conceptual underpinnings of each, but I guess I'll focus mainly on the technical aspects because we have limited time. And I'm already after. Thank you for waiting. Also, there's some moving parts I had to deal with. So the first show is Dwelling. It's a transmedia work from Peter Power and Leon Butler in collaboration with myself, Kaylin Finn, Robin Byrne, and Rosie Stebbing. Interactivity? Yeah. Peter and Kaylin are here today as well. And this debuted at the Beta Festival in Dublin 2023. And this, it's kind of, the intention of it is to be, to have multiple different forms, and it could also be, an installation for a gallery. But this form was a live theater performance, kind of driven by a dance performer, which had interactive elements, so that like there was motion track from a dancer, the parameters which controlled like a shader on being back projected onto a screen, the parameters of which were being controlled by Kaylin. There were also lighting elements which were being driven by TouchDesigner, which were also being controlled by me or being controlled by actually QLab, being sending different scenes for it. The themes that I'm kind of paraphrasing really shortly, but the themes that the work deals with are those of kind of the digital divide and kind of the effects of our mediating technology on our psychology, especially throughout the pandemic and in its aftermath. I guess my roles in this show were the initial screen design. So what we conceived of was a two-way mirror, so that depending on the lighting state in front of the screen, the reflections of the performer could be integrated to a greater or lesser degree with the projections happening on the screen, as opposed to having just a screen in the background kind of depicting the digital world. It was kind of intended to have this kind of blur of lines between what was real and what was not. So that worked reasonably well. It actually came out quite dark, which gave this show quite a different mood, I think, than maybe was initially intended, but that was kind of, we worked with it, and actually I was quite happy with how the aesthetic looked in the end. This is kind of the main thing I'm going to want to, I'll be back to this kind of towards the end of the section, because this kind of is one of the main kind of things I want to impart, is kind of how kind of best practices for network design for larger scale theater shows or for larger scale whatever installation shows and spaces. And I also had some video design work, which this was kind of based on one of the second section of the show, which had a kind of a piece where the performer was at a computer, and then all these kind of pop-ups of like admin started coming up, and then they exploded across the screen into into kind of memes and levity and atrocity and a kind of conspiracy and pornography and all these things, kind of meant to kind of be a commentary on the kind of fractured experience that we all live now. And so performances like this particular section was kind of performed live by me. There was kind of like a moshing machine I built. So as the performer was kind of like acting erratically, and the music was really intense and kind of glitchy. I'll show you a brief demo of this. This was initially made for or controlled by a Korg Nano control. I've recently updated it to, so this is now a touchscreen interface, which I'm able to, just interactive. Sorry, it's slow. But I also built it to have multiple different inputs, so you can also insert a camera to it. It says, as you're running not so fast. I bought this camera at a pound shop in Portugal in the middle of nowhere 2 weeks ago. So, but yeah, you can kind of feed anything into it and maybe get something interesting. Still little inputs. And so, yeah, this is kind of the main thing I want to really apart is just making clear distinctions between video and network. Is that like the red line is our visual media, so that's kind of, and we were like running at 4K, so it was like all Cat6 higher bandwidth cables. And then I always try to separate the networks entirely. I have 2 different switches, one for one for control data, so the blue lights would be OSC and MIDI primarily, and ArcNet as well. You can do this on one switch, and you can configure a switch to hold 2 different networks, but I prefer to keep them completely separate. Also, if something goes down, it's easier to, when there's a physical cable to follow, it's kind of idiot-proof in that way. The 3 machines that have circles around it are the kind of master machines as such. Now, some were slave also, because the TouchDesigner PC also received OSC commands from the QLab PC. The QLab is kind of the main determiner, which was Peter's computer, which that then sent OSC commands to the traditional lighting console, the ATC, as well as TouchDesigner PC to move into different lighting settings to the window, but also the Resident PC. So I noticed that Walt said he also still incorporates Resolute. I find it's something coming from a VJ background. It's also like it's hard to let go of it because it really works. It's really good to kind of get set up really quickly. It's quite an easy interface, especially for projection mapping. But also, like in this case, it was hosting videos, but also as well hosting NDI streams. So that which were coming from the Unity PC or the TouchDesigner PC, kind of alternatively. And yeah, I think. All right. Time 10 minutes. Okay, the last thing I want to show about this is that at some point, Kalen was like, the intention was for him to have a MIDI controller controlling elements of the shader on the Unity PC, but he was trying to use a really long USB cable, and it just wasn't connecting, and it wasn't able to control the parameters. And as opposed to like having him, it was in the 4th section of the show, so the Kinect camera needed to be quite close to the Unity PC, which was installed just behind the bed. Initial thoughts were, okay, it could sit there and wait till the 4th scene and then perform it at quite close proximity because the NAT control would work at close proximity, not over the long USB cable. But the idea I had at the end was he plugged directly into my PC with his MIDI controller, and I was able to build a small, actually. So this was my interface, which controls controls this essentially, which was the original NAT control stuff. But I built a small little API for him so that I could calibrate his MIDI data and then just send it over the network to the Unity PC. So that's a good example of like once you have built the infrastructure, it's a good way to problem solve, you can then just like lean into finding solutions within the network. And I'll leave that there and jump straight onto the next bit because I've kind of a bit to get through. Maybe one question before I move, if there is any. Good. So the second show is speculative cartographies. This was a work made in collaboration with Gianni Leneri de Fornade, Rory Malone is an Irish artist as well, and Marjolein van der Meer. And this was debuted as part of the Development 22, which was kind of like an initiative from the Berlin Senate to kind of promote public works or outdoor works so people could social distance more, more easily. And basically, the form that this took was kind of an interactive public work constituting 4 events over the course of 3 months where artists were invited to do an installation or a performance. And then we interviewed the public who showed up to these places, or to these events rather, on what they thought that what they thought about the future of public space. And they were kind of like specific questions for each location. We recorded them, and then I basically composed an hour-long score, or like 4 15-minute movements, and incorporated their answers into the scores, one for each location. Actually, full screen. So this is kind of like the graphic which was set up. If anyone's familiar with Berlin, it's like it was around this location, so it's like Erlitzer Park. At Erlitzer Park, we were asking what people thought about what they thought the future of leisure would be. At the kind of central hub where we had the installation, the sound walk over the course of the weekend, the end of October, it was like what they thought the future of transport would be. It was an old Deutsche Bahn storage tunnel, essentially. Here there's in Schlesische Busch, there's an old GDR watchtower, and there we were asking what the future of security would be, although it definitely took a surveillance turn, I guess. And then down here, at Lende Dreieck is where like it's where the Berlin Wall used to run out here, and it's kind of like where the 3 boroughs meet. So Kreuzberg, like Köln, and Alt-Treptow. So it's kind of the borderlands between the 3. So we were asking what they thought the future of borders would look like. So this is what the main hub looked like. Roy Malone did some point cloud scans into each location, and he went and made these augmented reality sculptures as well. He used an app called Era Lupa, so you could go around the trail and scan the area, and there would be these sculptures. Whereas I made this, the score essentially, and then built the system in TouchDesigner entirely out of smartphones. So we used 6 smartphones, and the point was to have the GPS of each individual smartphone transmitted over a VPN to my PC, which wasn't even local actually, it was in my apartment a few kilometers away. And there was like a 4-track mixer of like 4 movements played in unison, and depending on the GPS of the individual phone, it would tell my computer which of the 4 movements to send back into the VPN to that individual device. And this is what it looked like in the end. People gave us their keys or their IDs essentially as collateral, and just took it as a walk over the area. We did have one not stolen as such. He gave us an iPhone like 12, which was, we got a great deal out of it. Like these phones cost like €80 or €90, which is actually why, I should say that I initially had intended this to be an ambisonic thing, which would have like sound emitters in space. So as people walked around and got close to it and moved around it, that it would be, positional. But these phones were so cheap, they had no gyroscopes. So all I was left with to use was like an XY map, so that when people would transgress a border, it would then be just a score would roughly be moved left to right. And yes, it's essentially it. I'll just jump into a measure look under the hood now. So this is what the patch looked like. These are the 6 phones, or the 6 systems. In here is where the 4 audio tracks are playing in unison. And each are being funneled into their own calibration system. Right now, I'm sending, instead of sending GPS from my phone right now, I'm using the accelerometer because I can't move around too much. So to demo it, what this is going to look like is as I move, as I move my phone or tilt it this way, I'm moving into the top right quadrant. If I tilt it this way, I'm moving into the top left, back, bottom left, back right, bottom, back right. Just to give you an idea of how it works. And you can see the 4 tracks moving down. They're all playing at the minute because there's a filter on the data, so it eventually settles. So it wasn't such an abrupt cut as you moved from one quadrant into the next. So I'll jump straight in. Okay, so the first section is calibrating coordinates. I have to turn it off now because I'm using the accelerometer data and not GPS. Berlin is roughly at 52.5 degrees north, 13.4 degrees east. So these maths are basically just calibrating the data from 13.4 east, 15.25 north into a normalized space of 0 to 1. And so this is kind of like a determination to the machine as such. So it's like a if this then or then that. Currently you can see that this is, x plus 1, y minus 1. So we're actually in this area here, which was where the main kind of hub was. And you can see basically, depending on which combination of these 4, so if I'm over here, it's going to give a value and of which one of these switches are on at any one time. And which one is on basically defines the volume of one of the 4 tracks, which are then fed back to the system. I'll actually turn it up a little bit now so you can tell I'm not just spoofing. No. So this is the guard survivor section. Just going to move it now into the tape grid here. This is a little patchy now. So this is actually being sent over the internet via VPN to my phone. It's not. You can do it locally too on a local network, but
I wonder how many sun power units it will take to move galaxies of individuals from one galaxy to the next.
As we move into the next one.
We'll run out of energy even sooner than we run out of galaxies. We'll just have to build new stars out of interstellar gas. There may be some way to reverse entropy.
Totally lose. I like physics, I think, but don't like me. I think efficiency. I like efficiency of
Hans found the new galaxy with a faint interest in the countless twists of stars that powdered it. He had never seen this one before. Would he ever see them all? So many of them, each with its load of humanity. But a load that was almost a dead weight. More and more, the real essence of men is to be found out here. It's worried.
So the excerpts you're hearing are from Marjolein van der Meer reading passages from Isaac Asimov's The Last Question. It's this kind of really beautiful cyclical story, which we kind of felt kind of tied in with these questions about the future of what our object space would be. That's essentially it. I mean, the rest is just determining which the volumes of each of the tracks which are being played simultaneously, they're then summated, and then they're sent back to one of the individuals marked on this one. So that times 6, and that was ultimately the system.